Hey guys, welcome to Ability Driven Teaching. It's Madison and Kasey here.
Hi.
So today we're talking about involving high school students in their IEP process. This is like the sister to the episode that we did involving your elementary school students in the IEP process. So today Kasey is going to tell us all about how to involve your older students in their IEP process.
Right. And I taught specifically high school, but I think a lot of this applies to middle school as well. So if you're a middle school teacher, this information is still valuable to you.
Awesome. So Kasey, tell us, break down the goals for kids who are older in middle and high school. What do you want them to be involved in throughout their IEP process?
Right. So legally, if a student's 16 or older, they do have to have transition goals. And I really encourage that you start this in middle school, even if the student is 11, or even in the elementary school, because it's never too early to start thinking about transition. But you're going to have to talk with the student, and you're going to have to make post-secondary goals. And post-secondary means after they have graduated high school. So these goals have to be after high school. That's the key point. If you make a goal saying that by the time they're 17, they'll get their driver's license, that doesn't count. So it has to be after they graduate.
So what's a good goal for post-secondary then? Just give us an example.
Yeah, so you have to have 4 categories. So the 4 are going to be employment, and this is typically going to be like a career plan. It's not going to be like, they're going to go to college, but while in college, they will have this part-time job at Starbucks. Normally it's what is their career plan and whether they go to college or not. So it could be they're going to work in a bakery and be a baker. It could be they're going to be an accountant or go into the military. So this is where your student needs to be very involved because obviously it's their career you're talking about. And there's a lot of free career guidances, quizzes online that you can find. Your school district may have one that they prefer. So just kind of ask around and see. But it's really about what is the student interested in. So that's going to be your first one is employment. Also, you're going to have education. So it's education/training. So even if your student doesn't plan to go to college, what kind of training do they need for their career? So if they're a baker, they need to know the necessary skills of baking. Or if they go into the military, they're going to have to go through boot camp. And then normally after boot camp, there's some type of training school for their job. So the education or training can be, within 4 years of graduating high school. Joseph will graduate with a bachelor's degree in accounting. It could be something very specific like that, or it could be more tailor-based to them if they're not going to college. So that one can be a little tricky depending on what they want to do. The third one is going to be your independent living skills. So how are they going to live on their own eventually? And what skills do they need to do that? So if they don't, which I always recommend to parents that they get this set up before they graduate, but if they don't, they really need to set up a savings account and a checking account.
That's so important.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
So important.
A lot of our kids will have checking accounts, but also savings account.
Very important.
Yes. You're not going to be able to thrive as an adult if you do not know how to save.
Yeah. And you can get checkings and savings accounts for your kids well into elementary. You could get them early. So as early as you are financially able to, get an account set up for your kid and start having those conversations, because that is so important. Financial responsibility and financial literacy is so important. I am married to someone in the banking industry, and so we talk about this a lot at home. I am working on my financial literacy myself, but the earlier you have those conversations, the better. So that is perfect.
Right. And you can start young. You can start in middle school, start in elementary school. It can be like, okay, you got a birthday gift from grandma, that's $50. And then you can have this conversation with a student. What amount of money from that $50 should we put into your savings account? And you can get them in the habit of starting saving early.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so other independent skills could be, you're going to talk with your student. What's their plan? Do they plan to go to college and live in a college dorm? Do they want to move out and live with a roommate? Do they plan to stay in their parents' house? And if so, do the parents know that plan?
And are they going to pay rent? Like,
Yes.
how is that going to work? That makes a whole lot of sense.
So there's so many different ones you can do with that. And it's really, when you're talking to your student, it's a conversation of, well, what do you want to do after high school? And then if they say, I want to be, a pro wrestler, then you have to say, okay, well, how do you get from where you're at now to being a pro wrestler? So if they don't know, then that's something you would look up online. And then maybe pro wrestling is not going to be their thing.
Or maybe like a backup plan. What does that look like? How do you do a plan A, B, and sometimes we also need plan C's.
So I think the more that you help them investigate their career that they imagine, they can kind of see, oh, you know what? I don't like lifting weights. So maybe pro wrestling isn't for me. So then you start talking about, well, what's something else you're really passionate about? So once you start somewhere with an idea, then you kind of break it down into smaller chunks of how do I get from where I'm at now, or how do I get from where I'm at after high school to that goal.
Yeah.
So that's what all of these goals are about. So yeah.
So that sounds like there's a lot of stuff that you can involve your high school and middle schoolers in on the pre-planning. That sounds like a lot of pre-planning. What are my goals? What are my transition goals? What do I see myself doing in the future? So once you have the IEP, everything is written and done, because it sounds like there's a lot of aspects for the young adult, excuse me. I work with children, you work with young adults. So it sounds like there's a lot of pre-planning that you can involve them in. When the IEP is all written, said and done, it's time to prep for the meeting. What do you involve them in, or what could you involve them in meeting wise?
Right. So I always tell them, like, this is the meeting date and we need to talk to your teacher that you're going to miss class during that time, because for my school, it was very strongly encouraged that the meetings are during the school day. It really depends on your school for that. But I didn't make it sound super optional that they come to the meeting, because I very strongly believe that this meeting is about them. They need to be at this meeting.
That makes sense.
And I've done, I don't even know how many IP meetings, and I've only had one where the student was not there. And that was because the parent felt very strongly that they should not be there. And that is the parent's choice.
To a certain extent.
You have to respect that. Yeah. So I think talking with the student, making sure they know that they are, first of all, attending the meeting. What is the meeting about? Talking about, of course, their goals. And then once they start getting this plan in place of what their goal is for their future, having them come up with a plan for how to communicate that during the meeting. And it could be very simple of, I'm going to ask you, what's your future plans? And they're just going to talk about it. It could be they want something more structured. They could make a PowerPoint and present it at the meeting, or they could have note cards that gives them, little topics to talk about, because sometimes just asking a very vague, broad question can be intimidating for students. Depending on their age, I also try to involve a transition coordinator. Again, I like to get this done as early as possible, but in some school districts, because there's so many children, the transition coordinator only works with a certain age and up.
Yeah.
Talking with the parents and the student about what's the word I'm looking for? What services are available to them after high school, and getting that person involved. But having the student, if they're comfortable, kind of lead the meeting, and at least, like you said before in the previous episode, introduce everyone. They should know everyone at the table, talk about their strengths, what they feel they're really good at. And yeah, by the time we get to high school, they're normally pretty comfortable saying, like, I want to join the military, or I want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And just making sure that everyone knows what the student wants, and that the student feels like they have a voice, and that they feel like they are in control, because even though we're creating the meeting, it's all about the student.
Yeah. And I feel like it's important to stress that the earlier you empower students to be a part of their meeting, the easier it is on their high school teachers to have them be a full part of the meeting. I feel like sometimes I ran into this in a middle school, but I was student teaching. But I feel like a lot of teachers in the middle and high school level run into situations where kids don't understand that they have an IEP in place in the first place. They don't know that they have a disability. They don't know how to articulate the accommodations that they need or the things that they are good at. And so if we start that early on, empowering our kids to understand what it means to have an IEP, a 504, the accommodations necessary to make them successful in school, the things they're good at. If we don't start doing that in elementary school, it makes it harder for our middle school and high school counterparts to empower kids to be more independent and sufficient in those ways of advocating. That's the word I'm looking for. Right. Advocating for themselves.
And then even when they get to the high school level, it's so important that you remember you're not just trying to get the student through high school. What is after high school? Because that's going to be a majority of their life. Mm-hmm. And so I have a conversation with parents and students every time so that they know, okay, if your plan is to go to college, colleges do not legally have to follow your IEP. There's no requirement for that or a 504. So what you have to do is you yourself go talk to the Disability Services Office, and then they'll tell you what the requirements are for requesting accommodations for extra time. Mm-hmm. So once you get out of the high school level, it's a lot more, you have to start the conversations.
Yeah, those self-advocacy skills are really important.
Right. And even like state services, you have to apply for those. They don't come like knocking on your door. Hello, would you like some services?
I heard through the grapevine you might need some services.
Yes. So just preparing the student and their parent to know that they have to start that process, whether again, it's through the state, through the university, what their plan is, making sure they know that, because otherwise it's going to be a pretty big shock, because in public school, we are required to go to the family and say, oh, you have, an IEP meeting coming up. Let's go through your services that you need. And once you get out of public school, they're not going to come to you.
Yeah, you've got to figure out where to go. And your public school, your high school, public school should help you. And you should know to ask them to find out what you are able to access after high school, whether it be through a university or through a state organization, anything like that. You should be able to ask them, and they should be able to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, if you're a parent or a student with a disability, I would highly recommend that before that student graduates from high school, you know what the next step is. Mm-hmm. So if you need services in college or you need services at home, know who to contact and what to say.
Yeah, and there are definitely services out there for people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you just need to ask the right people, and your public school, your students' case manager should know how to point you in the right direction, and you shouldn't have to ask the right questions to be pointed in the right direction. But if not, listen to our podcast, and there's a lot of episodes on here that will get you the right questions to ask to get you in the right direction.
Right. So yeah, in high school, I would just say it's more about getting them ready for life after high school. Even middle school, it should be, these are only a few years of your life. Majority of your life is going to be outside of this school. Mm-hmm. What are we doing to prepare for that?
Yeah, what does that look like?
Yep.
That's some good advice. So Kasey, thanks for all this great advice. Where can our listeners find you? Because you have a bunch of, Kasey has a lot of stuff on her TPT store geared towards high school IEPs and that IEP process. So where can they find that information?
Right. So my Instagram is Sped for Secondary Ed. You can find me on TPT, Teachers Pay Teachers, Sped for Secondary Ed. And I also have a website, again, spedforsecondary.ed.com. And yeah, we've been trying to give more tips on our Instagram at Ability Driven Teaching. So you can find us both there as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Kasey. This is a lot of good information for our high school teachers and our high school parents.
Thanks. And like I said, feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. I'd love to connect with y'all.
All right. Thanks, guys. You can find us, like Kasey said, at Ability Driven Teaching. It was great talking to y'all about this. Thanks, Kasey.
Bye.